Imagine a country where um, manufacturing makes up just 1% of the economy.
Right, essentially nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it imports $34 million more than it exports.
Which is just a staggering deficit.
Yeah, and on top of that, 100% of its rural land sits less than 15 feet above a rising ocean.
It's a terrifying physical reality.
It really
Yeah.
is. I mean, by every traditional metric, by every standard textbook definition you'd learn in school, this is a failed state in the making.
Oh, absolutely.
Yet its national income is actually growing.
Which just defies all logic.
It does. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're unpacking the ultimate economic paradox. We're looking at Tuvalu's lifeline economy.
It is the kind of scenario that, completely breaks conventional economic modeling.
Oh, totally.
You have this massive, seemingly insurmountable downward pressure from a total lack of physical production.
Right.
And that's combined with an existential environmental threat. But despite all of that, the financial trend line points upward.
It's why.
It really is. It's an incredibly resilient micro picture that challenges basically everything we assume about how nations survive.
Exactly. And we were so glad you were joining us for this one.
Yeah.
Because if you are the kind of person who likes to, look under the hood of how the world actually works, this is going to be fascinating.
Oh, it's a brilliant case study.
Yeah. So our mission today, we are looking at a highly structured academic presentation outline all about Tuvalu.
And it's incredibly detailed.
It is a 15-page deep dive.
Yeah.
And we've cross-referenced it with literally thousands of raw data points from the World Bank, the IMF, the UN.
All the heavy hitters.
Right. We are talking about tracking everything from gross national income to broadband subscriptions all the way to diabetes rates.
It covers everything.
So let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Before we figure out how they are pulling off this survival trick, we really need to establish the baseline.
Yeah, you have to throw out your traditional mental map of a country.
You really do.
Okay.
Because to understand Tuvalu, you have to completely scale down your mental model of a nation state.
Right. We are looking at a microstate. The population data here, it puts them at just around 10,940 people.
10,000 people.
Yeah.
I mean, that is roughly the size of a small university campus.
Basically, yeah.
Or maybe like a single mid-sized neighborhood in a major city like Chicago or London.
Precisely. But this neighborhood has a seat at the United Nations.
Which is crazy to think about.
It has its own sovereign borders, its own macroeconomic dynamics, and it has to engage with global supply chains.
Right. They still have to buy things on the global market.
Exactly. And when your economic engine is that small, the metrics behave in ways that look, frankly, erratic to outsiders.
They really do. Like the per capita GDP, for example, it hovers around $3,000.
Which is quite low.
Yeah. But it's not a stable, predictable $3,000 year over year, is it?
Not at all. The growth charts look like a seismograph during a major earthquake.
That's a great way to put it.
We are talking about extreme roller coaster swings. The records show a massive economic crash of negative 17.5% growth in one single year.
Wow. Negative 17.5.
Yeah, and then inexplicably followed by a shocking spike of positive 20% in another year.
That is, I mean, what's fascinating here is that this extreme volatility is actually the hallmark of extreme vulnerability, right?
Exactly. Think about the mechanics of a macroeconomy, like, say, the United States or Germany.
Okay.
A 20% swing in GDP in a single year would cause absolute global pandemonium.
Oh, it would be the Great Depression all over again, or the biggest boom in history.
Right. It would mean total societal collapse or a miraculous boom. But in Tuvalu, a 20% swing is just a reflection of their structural reality.
Because they're so small.
Exactly. When your entire economic base is that tiny, a single global event, maybe a shift in commodity prices, or a delay in a major aid package.
Or a storm.
Yes, a severe storm that damages their single port. It doesn't just cause a mild recession, it causes a mathematical crater.
It's like balancing a checkbook where you only have 3 transactions a month.
That's exactly it.
If one of those transactions is delayed, your month-over-month cash flow looks completely unhinged.
That is exactly how the math works out, and that structure is incredibly imbalanced by design.
Right. Let's look at what they actually do domestically.
Yeah, if we look at the breakdown of what makes up their domestic economy, the visual is striking. Agriculture accounts for about 15 to 26% of their GDP.
And this isn't massive commercial farming, right?
No. This is mostly subsistence, coconuts, taro, things that can survive in very difficult, salty soil.
Right here.
But manufacturing, Industrial production.
Yeah.
It is essentially non-existent. It sits at roughly 1%.
1%. I mean, they are barely making anything physical, which means they have to buy everything.
And they do. The import reliance is staggering.
I was looking at the trade data, and they are importing survival necessities from Europe, from Central Asia, across the Pacific.
Yeah, from everywhere.
When you produce almost nothing industrially, your import costs just completely overwhelm your export revenues.
Oh, absolutely. This is where that $34 million trade deficit comes from. It is a wildly disproportionate ratio.
I was trying to think of how to visualize this for you, the listener. Imagine a fortress that produces absolutely nothing of value inside its own walls,
Okay, I like this.
right? Like, they don't forge their own tools, they don't weave their own clothes, they don't build their own furniture.
They're just living in the walls.
Exactly. They order every single meal, every piece of clothing, every piece of technology from the outside world, and they pay for it to be shipped across vast oceans.
Which is incredibly expensive.
Right. And to make matters worse, the ground beneath the fortress is slowly sinking into a swamp.
Yeah, that's the kicker.
So, I mean, most economists looking at that ledger will call this a failed state. Are we looking at a failed state here?
Well, if you are only looking through the lens of gross domestic product, or GDP, then yes, it looks like a failing system.
Because the GDP is just domestic stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here is the vital difference, and this is the absolute key to understanding Tuvalu's survival.
Okay.
GDP measures what you make at home, inside your own physical borders. Tuvalu represents an extreme production hollow state.
Production hollow.
Right. Their GDP is naturally going to look abysmal because they simply do not have the land mass, the natural resources, or the population scale to support a domestic manufacturing base.
You can't put a car factory on an atoll.
You cannot build a factory economy on a few square miles of coral.
Right. So judging them by GDP is kind of like judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
Precisely. Which is why the academic analysis shifts our focus to a completely different metric, GNI, or gross national income.
And GNI is essentially the money flowing into your pockets, regardless of where on planet Earth it was actually generated.
Exactly. GNI includes all the income earned by your citizens and your government from overseas sources.
Which is huge for them.
It's everything. For Tuvalu, domestic production is almost an illusion. The real economy, the actual engine of their survival, is entirely externalized.
Okay, let's pause here because this is the crux of the whole paradox.
Yeah.
If they aren't making money by building things at home, where on earth is the money coming from to buy $34 million worth of imported goods every year?
That's a great question.
How do you fund a country that doesn't produce physical exports?
The analysis points to two primary external blood transfusions, as they call them. These are the invisible lifelines.
Invisible lifeline. I love that phrase.
It's very accurate. So the first of these lifelines is ODA, which stands for Official Development Assistance.
Okay.
In plain terms, international foreign aid.
Right. And looking at the timeline, the net ODA jumping into Tuvalu is drastic. Like in recent periods, it has broken the $6 million mark.
Which is a huge spike.
Now, I know $6 million doesn't sound like a lot when we're used to hearing about multi-billion-dollar relief packages in the news.
Right. But you have to remember the denominator here.
The population size.
Exactly. For a population of roughly 10,000 people, a $6 million injection of direct foreign aid is massive.
Oh, I guess that math really does change things.
It equates to roughly $550 for every single man, woman, and child, just in direct international assistance.
Wow. Where is this money coming from, and why are they giving it?
This is heavy bilateral aid coming primarily from regional powers, so Australia, Japan, New Zealand.
Okay, that makes sense geographically.
Yeah, and it forms the absolute bedrock of their public sector. This isn't just like extra cash for fun projects. This is the survival infrastructure.
What does it actually pay for?
It funds the government operations, it builds the seawalls, it pays for the clinics and schools. Without this external infusion, the basic state apparatus would basically struggle to function.
But wait, I have to push back here a little bit.
Sure.
Relying on foreign aid isn't an economy. That's a support system.
That's a fair point.
Right. If your entire country is just surviving on the charity of Australia and Japan, that's not resilience. That's just dependence.
Yes.
Like, if the political winds shift in Tokyo or Canberra and they cut the budget, Tuvalu just collapses.
That is a very fair critique, and it's exactly why ODA is only the first lifeline.
Okay.
It's the baseline that just keeps the lights on. But the second lifeline is where the actual active economic engine lives. And this is where it gets incredibly innovative.
I'm listening.
Their physical exports of goods might be essentially zero, but their service exports, and more importantly, their human capital exports, are staggering.
Right. The data shows significant revenues from things like information and communication technology services.
That's Celatom.
Because when you are isolated in the Pacific, your digital footprint can be much larger than your physical one.
Exactly.
But the true powerhouse, like the absolute core of family-level survival in Tuvalu, isn't tech. It's net secondary income.
Yes. Remittances?
The money sent home from Tuvaluans working overseas.
That's the real engine.
The peak numbers here just blew my mind. Over $27 million.
Let's do the math on that to really grasp the scale, right?
Please do.
$27 million in personal remittances flowing into a population of 10,000 people.
It's crazy.
That is almost $2,500 per person injected directly into the local household economy.
Wow.
It completely dwarfs their domestic manufacturing output. It eclipses the foreign aid we just talked about.
What's so wild to me is that Tuvalu has essentially bypassed the Industrial Revolution entirely.
They really have.
They skip the factories. They skip the assembly lines. Their primary export isn't a physical good that gets, loaded onto a pallet.
No.
Their export is labor. It's their people.
What's fascinating here is that this is the textbook definition of a highly extroverted lifeline economy.
Extroverted, meaning facing outward.
Exactly. When you lack natural resources, when you lack arable land at scale, you simply cannot build an economy based on extracting things from the ground.
Right.
Or assembling things in a warehouse. So you export the only resource you have, human capability.
But explain the mechanics of this. Like, are we talking about Tuvaluans moving to Sydney permanently and mailing checks back to their cousins?
Sometimes, yes. There is a diaspora, but often it's highly organized temporary labor migration.
Okay.
Tuvaluans have a long established history as incredibly skilled seafarers.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they work on international merchant ships, cargo vessels, commercial fishing fleets all across the globe.
So they're out on the water for months at a time.
Exactly. They also participate in seasonal worker programs in New Zealand and Australia. So they might go work in agriculture or services for a season and then send the bulk of those earnings directly back to the islands.
So it's globalization distilled down to its purest, most necessary form.
It really is.
They are surviving via a financial IV drip. You have someone from a tiny coral atoll earning wages in the freezing waters of the North Atlantic or, in a bustling city in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And that capital is beamed back digitally to the Pacific to keep the local economy breathing.
Exactly. It is a highly adapted, rational response to severe physical constraints. It is not dependence in the traditional sense. It is a globally distributed workforce sustaining a central cultural home base.
But to export labor and services, especially in the modern globalized world, you need a specific kind of population.
You do. You can't just send anybody.
Right. You cannot just export untrained individuals and expect to generate $27 million in international remittances for a population of 10,000.
No, they wouldn't get the contracts.
Exactly. You need people equipped to navigate international systems, negotiate contracts, and manage complex logistics.
Which brings us to the most crucial structural requirement of this entire economic model.
The human capital engine.
The workforce must be highly capable.
And man, this is where the demographic data tells a truly incredible story, but with a massive, very deliberate catch.
Oh, the bottleneck, yes.
Let's look at the miracle first, though. Despite severe economic limits, despite the logistical nightmare of running schools on remote, sinking atolls with volatile budgets,
Which is incredibly hard.
adult and youth literacy in Tuvalu is practically 100%.
It is a phenomenal achievement. The primary school completion rates consistently exceed 90%.
That's better than a lot of developed nations.
It is. And in some years, they achieve complete 100% coverage across the board for both boys and girls. They are ensuring that virtually every single child receives a strong baseline education.
The progress bars in the report are just maxed out. They have built an incredibly solid foundation of basic human capability.
Yes, they have.
But then, you look at the older demographics, and there is a massive cliff-edge drop-off.
It's a very sharp drop.
Among the population aged 25 and older, only about 3% hold a bachelor's degree or higher. 3%.
It's a dramatic bottleneck. You have this funnel that is incredibly wide at the basic education level, capturing almost everyone. And then It abruptly chokes off to almost nothing at the university level.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. I was looking at this 3% figure and thinking, how is this possible?
Yeah, what's going on there?
Is this a tragic failure of their education system? Are they just too poor to send kids to college? Or is this actually a forced feature of their economic model?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the lifeline economy, it starts to look less like a simple failure and more like a carefully balanced, albeit very difficult equilibrium.
Okay, unpack that.
This is what economists refer to as the brain drain loop, but it's functioning in a highly specific way here.
Explain that because it feels completely counterintuitive. Usually, we are taught that more college degrees equal a better economy.
Right.
We're constantly pushing for higher graduation rates globally.
In a traditional, physically expansive economy, yes. Because in a place like the US or the UK, those college graduates stick around.
Yeah, they get local jobs.
They start local businesses, they invent new technologies, they build domestic industries, and they drive internal consumption.
They buy houses and cars.
Exactly. But remember our baseline, Tuvalu has no domestic industry.
Right.
If you get a bachelor's degree in advanced structural engineering or corporate finance or biomedical sciences, there are absolutely no high-paying jobs waiting for you back in Tuvalu.
There are no skyscrapers to build.
None.
So if you get that degree...
You leave. And more importantly, you likely leave permanently. You immigrate. You settle down in Auckland or Brisbane or London.
Right.
You get a high-paying job. You buy a house there. You integrate into that society. And eventually, the remittance pipeline back to Tuvalu dries up.
Because your life is there now.
Exactly. Your economic output is fully absorbed by your new host country.
Oh, wow. Wait. Are you saying the government is intentionally bottlenecking higher education so people are forced into manual labor abroad just to keep the remittance money flowing?
Well,
Because that sounds incredibly cynical. That sounds like a dystopian trap.
it's not necessarily an intentional, cynical policy of suppression.
Okay, good.
It's more of an organic, systemic constraint born out of their unique geography.
How so?
Sponsoring a student to go overseas for a full 4-year university degree is astronomically expensive for a microstate. The scholarships are limited,
Right, they just don't have the budget.
but the effect of this bottleneck inadvertently maintains the exact type of workforce needed to sustain their specific survival model.
Okay, walk me through that. How does keeping degrees at 3% help survival?
The flawless basic education that near 100% literacy ensures citizens are highly capable.
Right, they can read, do math.
They have the math, reading, and problem-solving skills to go work as highly skilled maritime workers or in mid-level service jobs or specialized agricultural roles abroad.
Okay, I see.
Crucially, these are the types of jobs that often involve temporary or rotational labor migration.
They go out, work a contract for 6 months or a year,
Yeah.
but their primary residence, their family, their cultural anchor remains firmly in Tuvalu.
Exactly. They keep very strong ties to the islands. They aren't integrating into the foreign middle class permanently. They are expeditionary earners.
Expeditionary earners, wow.
And because they intend to return, or because their immediate dependents are still in Tuvalu, they send that $27 million home.
Because they have to.
Right. The basic education is the fuel for the remittance engine. If you drastically increase the number of bachelor's degrees without magically inventing a domestic industry to employ them,
Which they can't do.
you wouldn't enrich Tuvalu, you would simply accelerate permanent emigration. The nation would hollow out its own population.
That is a staggering human capital strategy. It's a survival tactic dictated entirely by physical limits.
It really is.
You educate your people just enough to be highly competitive in the global working class, but not so much that they permanently escape the gravity of the island.
It is a profound balancing act, and it highlights how traditional development metrics like assuming a low university graduation rate means a country is failing, they simply do not apply here.
But living this highly unique lifestyle, relying on money earned in foreign oceans to buy all your essential goods from foreign continents, it doesn't just impact your macroeconomic charts.
No, it impacts the people.
It literally changes the biology of the population. We need to talk about the health data, because the paradox here is just as extreme as the economic one.
The demographic and public health data we are looking at paints a picture of a nation caught violently between two different eras of medical history.
It's wild.
On one hand, you have the incredible, undeniable victories of modern international aid.
To put this into perspective, let's look at the historical child mortality numbers.
Yes.
Not that long ago, the under 5 male mortality rate was around 114 per 1,000 live births.
Which is heartbreaking.
Think about that human reality. More than 1 in 10 boys didn't make it to their 5th birthday. That is a devastating rate of loss for any community, let alone one with only 10,000 people.
It was a classic profile of a developing nation struggling with infectious diseases and basic sanitation. But the recent data shows that same mortality rate has plummeted down to around 22 per 1,000.
From 114 to 22.
That is an enormous life-changing reduction.
And it's not just mortality. The measles vaccination rate is holding strong above 90%.
Which is excellent coverage.
Open defecation, which is a major driver of waterborne illnesses, has been nearly eradicated, dropping down to about 1% of the population.
Another huge win.
Access to basic hand-washing facilities is steadily rising across both urban and rural areas.
These are the textbook markers of successful global development. This is where that official development assistance, that $6 million in foreign aid, was successfully converted into physical survival infrastructure.
The plumbing in the clinics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Australia, Japan, the World Health Organization, they helped fund better sanitation, robust vaccination programs, and safer childbirth protocols.
It worked.
It worked beautifully. Tuvalu effectively walled off the traditional developing world infectious diseases that plagued the 19th and 20th centuries.
It's an incredible success story. But then you look at the adult health data.
Yes. And it is a completely different story.
It's a full-blown crisis. Non-communicable diseases, or NCDs, are absolutely ravaging the adult population.
The numbers are deeply alarming. Among adults aged 20 to 79, the prevalence of diabetes is a shocking 19.2%.
Nearly 1 in 5 adults is dealing with diabetes.
Yes.
And when you look at the top causes of mortality for people between 30 and 70 years old, it's not infectious diseases anymore.
Not at all.
It's cardiovascular diseases, cancer, and diabetes. This isn't a crisis of sanitation. It's a metabolic crisis. It's a lifestyle crisis.
This raises an important question. How do you cure the infectious diseases of poverty only to immediately succumb to the metabolic diseases of affluence, all without ever actually experiencing a domestic industrial boom?
So what does this all mean? How does this happen?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it ties directly back to the very first thing we discussed, the 1% manufacturing and the massive trade deficit.
Because they don't make anything.
Tuvalu produces almost no food domestically. Their agriculture is minimal due to incredibly poor soil.
It's basically sand and coral.
Exactly. And as sea levels rise, the saltwater intrusion ruins the groundwater, making it even harder to grow traditional crops like taro.
Oh, the salt just kills the roots.
Precisely. Therefore, they must import almost everything they consume.
And let's think about the logistics of this. When you are a remote island nation, importing your food supply via massive cargo ships that take weeks to cross the Pacific Ocean, what kind of food actually makes the trip?
You certainly aren't importing fragile, highly perishable fresh greens or organic berries.
No way.
Fresh produce requires a pristine, unbroken cold chain from the farm in Australia all the way to the market in Tuvalu. It is incredibly difficult, highly prone to spoilage, and astronomically expensive.
So what do you import instead?
Highly processed, shelf-stable, calorie-dense, nutrient-poor foods.
Spam noodles.
Canned meats, refined carbohydrates, instant noodles, sugary drinks. These items can sit in the hull of a hot cargo ship for a month without spoiling. They are cheap to buy and cheap to transport.
I want to go back to that fortress analogy from earlier.
The walls, yeah.
It's like they used foreign aid to build an impenetrable fortress against historical diseases. The walls are high, the sanitation is great, the children are safe from the plagues of the past.
Which is a good thing.
It is. But because they can't grow anything inside the courtyard, they have to order their food through the fortress gates. And the only food that survives the journey is making them sick from the inside out.
That is a very apt, very tragic analogy. The exact lifeline that keeps them from starting imported calories bought with remitted cash from overseas workers is driving an epidemic of non-communicable diseases.
It's a catch-22.
It is. The survival mechanism itself is toxic. It is a painful paradox of their economic model.
So you have a highly educated but purposely bottlenecked workforce, earning money overseas, sending it back to a sinking island to buy imported canned food that causes the diabetes epidemic, while foreign aid keeps the basic government functions running.
When you lay it all out like that.
It is a mind-bendingly complex balancing act.
And to keep this highly unique, offshore-dependent economy running, the physical infrastructure of the country has had to completely shift focus.
Because they don't need traditional infrastructure.
Exactly. When your economic survival doesn't depend on moving physical goods from a local factory to a local port, you don't need to pour all your resources into massive highway systems or rail networks.
Right, what's the point of a 4-lane highway on an island where you can practically see the ocean on both sides?
Exactly. So you build the digital equivalent of a highway.
Which brings us to the digital infrastructure data. The numbers here show a massive, accelerated pivot.
The jump is huge.
We are looking at fixed broadband subscriptions, shooting up from roughly 50 households just a few years ago to well over 452 recently.
Almost a tenfold increase.
Telecommunications and mobile networks are becoming the primary infrastructure investment.
The penetration of mobile networks and fixed broadband is completely breaking Tuvalu's geographical isolation.
But I have to ask, why the intense push for broadband?
Because it's essential.
I mean, obviously everyone wants the internet. We all want to stream movies and check the news. But when your actual land is sinking,
Yeah, the water is rising.
when you have immediate physical threats from king tides and saltwater intrusion, why prioritize fiber optics and mobile networks over, say, physical seawalls or desalination plants?
Because when your physical geography is a massive liability, your digital geography becomes your actual sovereign territory.
Well, that's interesting.
Think about the remittance economy we just unpacked. How does a Tuvaluan worker on a cargo ship in the Atlantic or a seasonal agricultural worker in New Zealand send money home? How do they coordinate with their families? It's not through physical mail. It's instantaneous digital transfer.
Ah, I see. Without the internet, the money stops flowing.
And think about the service exports. Tuvalu has generated significant revenue from licensing its internet domain name, .-TV.
Oh, right, like twitch.tv.
Exactly. That is a pure digital asset that requires zero physical landmass. How do Tuvaluan businesses or government agencies coordinate international aid, negotiate maritime borders, or advocate at global climate summits when they are thousands of miles from the nearest major continent?
So you zoom in.
It all relies entirely on digital connectivity.
So the broadband connection is literally their virtual port.
Yes.
If they don't have a massive physical harbor exporting steel and cars, their telecommunications network is the harbor exporting human capital and importing financial capital.
It is the central nervous system of the lifeline economy.
Precisely. If that digital link is severed, the entire remittance and aid structure collapses overnight. They are physically isolated, but they must remain digitally ubiquitous to survive.
But managing that virtual port and managing a fully sovereign nation with such extreme limitations brings us to some very sobering data regarding governance.
Yeah, this part of the report is a little tricky.
The World Bank tracks metrics on government effectiveness, and the scores for Tuvalu are consistently in the negative, fluctuating between negative 0.97 and negative 0.31.
Furthermore, the metrics tracking the control of corruption show high volatility and incredibly wide error margins.
Right.
Okay, we need to handle this carefully, because when a listener hears negative government effectiveness and volatility in corruption control, the immediate assumption is that the government is failing or corrupt or incompetent.
Which is an easy assumption to make.
How do we interpret these negative scores without being unfair to a microstate in such a unique position? Are they just bad at governing?
We have to look at this impartially and mathematically,
Yeah.
purely through the lens of capacity. The global indices for government effectiveness are designed to measure massive, complex states. Running a fully sovereign, modern nation-state apparatus is incredibly, almost unfathomably complex.
Just list out what a country actually needs to function on the global stage. Like, what departments do you have to have?
You need a central bank or a monetary authority. You need specialized regulatory agencies for telecommunications, for maritime law, for aviation.
Right.
You need a Ministry of Health that understands complex epidemiology. You need an education board, a diplomatic corps with ambassadors placed in key global capitals, and environmental protection agencies to negotiate international climate treaties.
And Tuvalu has to staff every single one of those highly specialized, incredibly demanding departments from a total national talent pool of only 10,000 people.
Exactly. Now, remember the human capital bottleneck we discussed earlier?
The 3%.
Only about 3% of the population holds a bachelor's degree or higher. We are talking about maybe a few hundred individuals total.
Oh my gosh.
You simply do not have the deep bench of specialized technocrats, international lawyers, and policy experts required to hit high marks on international government effectiveness metrics.
It's like asking a local town council in rural Ohio to suddenly manage international trade treaties with China, regulate a digital telecommunications network, and run a national healthcare system, all with the same 12 people.
That is a perfect way to frame it. The high volatility and the wide error margins in the corruption and governance data don't necessarily reflect malice or intentional graft.
It's just statistical noise.
They reflect the systemic, structural challenges of a microstate trying to meet macrostate bureaucratic standards. Small sample sizes break global indices.
Right.
When you only have a handful of major government contracts a year, a single procedural error or a delayed aid project sends your statistical ranking into a tailspin.
It's not about ill intent, it's about sheer mathematical capacity. You have a handful of highly educated people wearing 10 different hats. The Minister of Finance might also be dealing with local waste disposal logistics and negotiating a fisheries treaty on the same Tuesday.
Which is exactly why the digital realm is so crucial for their governance as well. If the physical state apparatus is strained to the breaking point by a lack of personnel, e-governance solutions, digital record keeping, and remote consultancy become the only way to effectively manage the country and keep the population connected to the global systems that sustain them.
Which brings us, inevitably, to the final piece of the puzzle. The elephant in the room. The ultimate existential threat hanging over this entire economic house of cards.
The environment.
We have to talk about physics versus economics.
The physical reality mapped out in the data is stark, and there is no debating the topography. 100% of Tuvalu's rural land is situated below 5 meters of elevation.
100%. Below 5 meters. For our listeners using the imperial system, we're talking about roughly 15 feet.
It's incredibly flat.
That is the height of a single-story house. The highest point in the entire nation is barely above the storm surge line of a severe hurricane.
It's just terrifying to visualize.
A massive king tide, a slight increase in global sea levels, and you are looking at devastating, irreversible inundation. The salt water breaches the soil, ruins the agriculture, poisons the drinking water, and eventually washes away the physical footprint of the country.
And the climate injustice here, as strictly outlined by the emissions data, is mathematically staggering.
I want to read this emission statistic because it genuinely stopped me in my tracks. The presentation highlights Tuvalu's greenhouse gas emissions. They are mathematically microscopic.
Almost non-existent.
We are looking at around 0.0035 million tons of CO2 equivalent.
In the grand scheme of global industrial emissions, that number is essentially zero. It is a rounding error. They have contributed absolutely nothing to the mechanics of global warming.
Yet they are standing on the absolute front lines, facing the most extreme terminal consequences of rising sea levels caused by the industrial output of nations thousands of miles away.
It is the ultimate tragic irony.
So how does an economist even begin to look at this?
Yeah.
How do you calculate long-term financial stability? How do you plan for a future when your physical bank vault, the actual land your country is built on, is steadily sinking into the Pacific?
This raises a fundamental, almost philosophical question about how we measure the true wealth of a nation.
Okay.
Traditional economics looks at physical assets. We measure GDP, we value the real estate, we count the factories, the miles of highway, the physical infrastructure.
Stuff you can touch.
Right. By that metric, Tuvalu's wealth is literally eroding by the day. But the economic analysis we're looking at introduces a different concept. It's called adjusted net savings.
The outline visualizes this as a waterfall chart. Walk us through how that calculation flows because it completely reframes how we think about national value.
Imagine a cascading waterfall of accounting. You start at the very top with the gross national income, all that money flowing in from foreign aid and overseas remittances.
Okay, we have our big pool of money.
From that pool, you subtract the depletion of fixed capital. This accounts for the wear and tear on your limited physical infrastructure, the rust on the telecommunications towers, the erosion of the seawalls, the degradation of the single airstrip.
That stuff breaks down fast in the ocean air.
It does. Then you subtract the costs of energy depletion and the devastating environmental degradation caused by the rising seas.
Normally, for a country facing total coastal inundation, subtracting the loss of physical land would send this final number plummeting deep into the negative.
Right. Mathematically, they'd be broke.
The physical assets are washing away, so the nation is going bankrupt.
Right. In a traditional model, the country is insolvent. But then, the adjusted net savings formula does something crucial. It adds back in a specific kind of investment.
What's that?
Education spending. It adds the investment in human capital. And this is the revelation of the entire analysis. Tuvalu's true national net wealth isn't stored in vulnerable land or rusting factories.
It is stored in the minds of its people.
Exactly. It's stored in their near 100% literacy rate. It is stored in their highly capable, globally mobile workforce.
Wow.
It is stored in their international financial reserves, bolstered by foreign aid and remittances, which are held safely in foreign banks, far from the rising tides. Their true wealth is entirely mobile.
So what does this all mean? If we summarize the final conclusion of this massive 15-page academic deep dive, it brings every contradictory data point we've discussed into a single, cohesive, incredibly brilliant theory of survival.
It does.
Tuvalu is the ultimate extroverted lifeline economy.
Yes. Its future survival isn't about desperately trying to build local factories or trying to manufacture physical goods on sinking atolls or pretending they can fight off the Pacific Ocean with a few $1 million of seawalls.
You can't fight the ocean.
You really can't. The blueprint for their continued existence relies entirely on three deeply interconnected pillars.
Let's lay them out. Pillar 1, ODA. The foreign aid that acts as the baseline life support, keeping the basic infrastructure and governance running.
Exactly. Pillar 2, remittances. The cash generated by their exported labor, their digital services, and their seafarers, providing the actual economic liquidity for families to survive and purchase necessities.
And Pillar 3, basic education. The highly accessible, near-universal primary schooling that ensures their population remains capable of participating in that global labor market, fueling the entire system.
The physical land is undeniably vulnerable. The soil is degrading, the tides are rising, but the system they have built, the push for digital transformation, the aggressive pursuit of climate adaptation financing on the global stage, and the deliberate internationalization of their human capital is remarkably resilient.
It's ingenious, really.
They have decoupled their economic survival from their physical geography.
Which leaves us with a genuinely mind-expanding concept to ponder. And this is something I want you, the listener, to really think about as you go about your day. We constantly look at Tuvalu as a tragic casualty of climate change. A tiny, helpless island nation slowly losing its physical territory to the ocean, waiting for the end.
Right, that's the standard narrative.
But what if they successfully complete this transition? What if they become a fully digital, stateless economy? An economy where the nation of Tuvalu exists not strictly on physical land, but through a shared digital identity, a robust .TV telecommunications network, international investments, and a globally dispersed, highly educated population that continues to send resources back to a sovereign digital entity.
It's a fascinating prospect.
It brings up a massive, unprecedented question for international law. What happens when a sovereign nation has no physical land left?
It's uncharted territory.
If the last atoll slips beneath the Pacific, do their international treaties, their UN seat, and their highly lucrative exclusive economic zone in the ocean just vanish? Can you legally be a country if your entire population lives as guests in other nations, connected only by a shared broadband network and a shared cultural identity?
It forces us to ask the ultimate question. What actually makes a nation? Is it the soil beneath our feet, or is it the network of its people?
Could this tiny sinking island actually be pioneering the exact survival blueprint that larger coastal nations, from Bangladesh to parts of the United States, are going to need 100 years from now? Are they the tragic canary in the coal mine, or are they the first successful prototype of the post-geography nation-state?
It's a paradigm shift.
That is the question we will leave you with today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the numbers, the paradoxes, and the incredible resilience behind Tuvalu's lifeline economy. As always, keep questioning the data around you, look past the traditional metrics, and we will catch you next time.